Welcome to the Northeast Kingdom Voice. I'm your host, Scott Wheeler. Today's guest is Vermont Senator Sam Douglas. He's here today to talk about what is going on in Montpelier. A question we all want to know. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Thanks, Scott, for having me. It's been a very sweltering couple days in northern Vermont. Are you in the kingdom, or are you out west?
I am currently outside of the kingdom, but sweltering as well. But you know what? My take on it is it won't be long, and the hot, sunny rays will be replaced with snowflakes. So I'm basking in it.
Yeah. Oh, my garden's certainly liking it right now. I'll say that.
So tell me, you're out of session, and does that mean you're doing nothing legislatively, or just not being paid to do it?
Yeah, just not being paid to do it is more accurate. No, when you're a legislator, the work never ends. So right now I'm talking to constituents, I'm answering emails, phone calls, working on bills in the background, because we still have access to the team, the crack team of legislative attorneys we have in Montpelier. So we're able to submit bills and work on them and do research. And so there's always work to do in the background when you're a legislator, even during session. When you're home and you're relaxing, you're still really not, because you have to read bills and you still have to, respond to constituents, answer emails. So being a legislator is more or less a 24-hour-a-day job, 365. So even though I'm out of session now, it's still a lot of things like this, and just going out into the community and making sure that I'm staying in touch with people and that they know that I'm here to listen to them if they need me.
You mentioned the legislative attorneys. A lot of people who haven't served in legislature, and as you know, I have, they don't have a clue about all of our resources there, including the legislative attorneys. Now, I'm not sure if my favorite legislative attorney is still there, Mike Chernick. Is he still there?
He is still there, and last you and I spoke, you had me say hello to him, and he says hello back and hopes that you're doing very well.
Yeah, great guy, has all the answers. So so how did the session go, as far as your point of view?
It was definitely a good first session. It was, and a lot of other legislators have pointed this out, and I've noticed this myself, having paid attention to many prior legislatures. It was a lot slower than it has been in the past, and especially early on in the session, we didn't really do very much, and the number of bills that we passed, I think, is substantially lower than it has been in a number of years, which, from my perspective, is generally a good thing. It's a lot easier. It's a lot easier to pass a new law than it is to get rid of a bad law that's already been in place. So it was definitely a fairly slow session, but from my perspective, it was definitely a good one. We got, I would say, a lot of really good things done this year, and I'm hoping we can do even more next year.
What's your favorite bill that was passed?
Oh, I'm biased, because the first bill that I ever introduced as a freshman senator, the first one ever, S45, the Right to Farm bill, that bill was actually passed and already signed by the governor. So I'm biased.
Okay. And what was the Right to Farm bill?
So it changed a lot from when I introduced it, but when I introduced it, it was nuisance protections for farmers, and that's how it ended up. It was just the language is a little bit weaker than we would have liked, but it landed in such a place where myself and the chair of Senate Agriculture, Senator Ingalls, Representative Rich Nelson from Derby, who's a dairy farmer, a number of us are happy where it ended up, but we wish it was the way it was when I introduced it. But when I introduced it, it was nuisance protections for farmers. So if you move in next to a farm, under, I can't say current law anymore because the new law has been passed, but under the previous law, somebody down the road, five miles down the road from you, could say that the smell of your farm blowing down the road is interfering their ability to enjoy their property, and they could sue you if they want. Vermont had some of the weakest protections for farmers in the country. And so really the bill that I introduced was just trying to bring parity to that and bring Vermont up to the level of a lot of other states. New York in particular has very strong right to farm laws for farmers. And so my bill was just trying to bring some parity, and make sure that farmers don't have to walk around in eggshells. There weren't that many instances where a farmer was getting sued, but it was enough of a threat to our farmers that they made it very clear that this was a priority for them. And walking around in eggshells wasn't good for them. You know, it's not going to encourage kids who already have a big struggle in following in their parents' or grandparents' footsteps and becoming a farmer themselves. If you watch your parents or your grandparents spend their whole lives worrying about when a new neighbor moves in down the road, you know, that's not an environment where you're going to want to get into farming. As it is, farming is a difficult profession. So it's just another layer of barriers to becoming a farmer and extending that into the new generations. So my bill was trying to do relatively a simple thing, just make it easier for farmers who are doing the right thing, who are farming the way that every other farmer does, just to not get sued for just being a farmer.
Now, what about there's I view it as an outlandish case of where I think something needs to be done is in the heart of Orleans. Will this protect that operation as well? Because I don't know if the person is actually operating underneath typical farming standards.
Yeah, so I got a number of phone calls and emails about that situation when I introduced the bill, and I definitely did think about that when it was being drafted. Well, the way that I interpreted it, and the way that I think the legislative attorneys also interpreted it, is it has to be a farm that's operating within generally acceptable agricultural practices.
Right.
So, if from your perspective, if that farm is not following those practices, which it doesn't appear to be, that are generally acceptable among all other farms of that particular type, then and I would say no, the bill I introduced wouldn't protect that particular farm. In the same way that, you know, a farmer that is hauling, you know, manure down the road, if a little bit spills out, that's normal. Most
Right.
farmers, when they haul, a little bit will spill out onto the road. That's fairly normal, because it's pretty impossible to keep it all under wraps. Um, but in that particular case, no, I don't think the bill I introduced would apply. And I would say that as the bill progressed through the final stages, to have the protection and to show that that you've been harmed by a particular agricultural practice or activity, you'd have to submit a subjective medical or a scientific statement, like from a doctor or somebody else, showing subjectively that they are not operating within the generally acceptable practices and they are posing a medical threat to you or the community. And I think in the case of that particular farm, I think that would be a relatively easy thing to do. So I would not say that the law in there would protect that farm. And I will say that all of that is kind of moot anyways, as the most recent Supreme Court case in the state of Vermont has actually ruled against farms similar to that one, and allowed municipalities to enforce their own agricultural zoning.
Right.
So from what I've heard, it seems like that farm is now coming under scrutiny under that new Supreme Court case, and we'll see where it goes from there.
So how is it having Representative Nelson in the state house, because there's very few, if any, other true farmers in the state house. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, he's the only actual farmer that's down there. I mean, I have goats, I have chickens, ducks, bees, and we have a semi-commercial sized garden we sell by the road. But that doesn't make me a farmer, at least in my opinion.
Right, right.
Though Richard says it does, actually, but he and I fight over that one. No, I think he's really the only farmer that we have down there, at least, and especially the only one that we've had down there for a number of years. So
I think if I recall right, doesn't Lieutenant Governor Rogers doesn't he have a hemp farm or something? Which I don't know
Yeah.
if makes
Yep.
farm.
Yeah. He has a farm. Absolutely. It's just not a dairy farm.
Right. Yeah. So no, I would imagine it would help because when I was in legislature, I used to chuckle about the ones who had a handful of chickens in a garden and they would list themselves as farmers. It's like, maybe, but probably not. So
What,
yeah,
what I've come to find is that the legal definition of a farmer is a lot looser than I thought it was, and I think than most people would think it is. I think most people would consider somebody, like Shappett's farm or Nelson's farm to be a farm, or the lieutenant governor's operation to be a farm, but not consider what I have to be a farm. And I have 30 chickens and 10 beehives and a really large garden that we sell from. Um, so they just wouldn't consider that. But apparently, if you have, it's a pretty low bar for what you need to be a farmer, um, which I find bizarre.
right. Hey, I want to bring up one I don't think will ever see the light of day in your, just because of the nature of it, is the Abenaki, and the Abenaki of Odanak. They have been like a lot of true native people of North America. They have risen up, and they have risen up, and they have tried. They have tried to get the legislature to take a second look at how the state recognized people who say they are Abenaki. And I personally don't think it'll see the light of day, even though I think it should. I think it's a serious issue, as it is across North America now. What is your take on it?
I'll be honest, I'm not altogether familiar with the issue. I know that there's a lot of complex opinions on it. I know that there's a lot of people that feel very strongly about it, and I do know that there is a significant number of people in my district that also feel strongly about it. But I have to agree with you that I do think that it's not going to happen for a good amount of time. I think that there are a lot of other issues that are on the hearts and minds of many legislators and also many Vermonters, that are getting in the way of things like that. But if there is a true issue here, and I think a lot of people think that there is, then it definitely should be taken a look at.
Yeah, I believe there is, because we it was bad enough we stole the land, we took the land from the native people. Now we are trying to rob them of their identity. Just proving who you are. Just prove it. If you have proof, prove it. I will say, I will publicly profess, I am part of the problem. In my quest to tell the story of the Northeast Kingdom, when it comes to the Abenaki people, unfortunately, I got some of it wrong, and I perpetuated myths, including the term hiding in plain sight. That never happened. But yeah, so I think it's an issue. If you're Abenaki or you have Abenaki blood, just show it. That's it. And Pretendians, those who have no Abenaki, they have no place in claiming they are. But that's going to be an issue that I think, is it's very important for the legislature to take up. It's already even gone to the United Nations. So, okay, what other issues are you facing?
Well, boy, what issues aren't we facing there, Scott? So one thing that hasn't been talked about enough, we've talked about it quite a bit in the legislature, but we haven't talked about it much in the public eye. And I feel every time I talk to somebody, I bring it up because it's a crisis that's coming. There are numerous crises that are coming to Vermont, that we can see coming from far in advance, and we just don't really follow up. And when we don't seem to address anything until it's a crisis. And a lot of these we can see from far off. One of those, being the power grid for one, and for two, the one that's coming even more rapidly, and we're going to be seeing this year in particular, is the transportation budget. We do not have enough money to pave our roads or to maintain our other infrastructure. We are going to be paving, I think it was 120 miles. I think it was 120 miles of roads this year, which is substantially less than it was last year, and is going to be substantially less next year as well. And a big part of the reason for that is declining revenues. So the way that we fund the transportation budget, there's a number of different taxes that feed into it and different revenues, both federal and domestic and state. But a big part of it is the gas tax. So when you drive and you need gas, you fill up, you pay a small tax on that gas, and that goes towards maintaining our roads. But unfortunately, as vehicles become more gas efficient, more fuel efficient, people buy less gas, so they spend less on the gas tax. So we're generating less revenue that way, and then we're also now incentivizing electric vehicles, which of course you don't buy gas for at all. So that's an entire person that's out of spending money on the gas tax, and that's going to be definitely, of course, less revenues coming in for the state. So it is going to be a much bigger issue next year than it is this year, and it is already a very big issue. In the chamber, I sit next to the senator from Lamoille County, who's the chair of Senate Transportation, and he goes on and on and on about it, and I find that very valuable because it's helped me to realize how important this one particular issue is that extends to most of all of Vermont. It isn't any one senator or representative's individual district that's affected by it. It's all of us. And this is definitely something that I think that we need to be addressing, and we need to be deciding, do we want to fund all the things we're funding now, or do we want to make basic infrastructure and the maintenance of that basic infrastructure a priority for our budgeting? So we have to decide that as a legislature.
And then, of course, you have the never-ending saga of education. And that's that one. You know, do you know from a history perspective, if you go through old documents in the town records, you could, if you read them, it would, without knowing when they were written or without the actual cost of education that are interdispersed in it, the conversations are actually very similar back in, say, 1920 or even 1880 as today. I have read, how are we going to pay for the ever rising cost of education? And then there's the issue of, lack of respect for education. And it really hasn't changed, just the numbers have. And it's an issue, I think, that our state, our country, and our world will be facing long after we are gone.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, we always seem to be bringing up education as a topic for discussion, and I think that's not just Vermont. I think you're right. I think it's across the entire country. I think every state is constantly trying to reform its education practices, and of course how they fund it and how it's structured. And I think a big reason for that is because you're dealing with a lot of different people, and it's a fairly complicated and complex system and topic, and how you're going to be educating thousands upon thousands, or in the case of some states, hundreds of thousands of students. And it costs a lot of money. In the state of Vermont, we spend over $2 billion on education funding. It's a very complex system with a lot of different factors in play. So I think it's going to be a complex system just by default, and we're going to continuously need to reassess it and look at, is what we're doing right? Have we made mistakes? Okay, let's fix them. What's working? What's not working? And I think that's an ongoing fight, and I think it always will be, just because of the complexity of the system. And I think that's the case for most of state government as well. So we'll see where that goes. We recently passed an education bill this year that has gotten a good amount of press, especially from the unions, the NEA, very negative press. But it's one of the only things that we've done this year that is actually going to have a market effect on property taxes. The modeling from the tax department that we saw is going to show over the next 5 years, starting in 2029, a significant decrease in tax bills across the state in the vast majority of towns. I think there's only 20 towns that are not going to see a decrease. Right. But there's still so much that needs to happen before any of that happens. The bill that we just passed has a ton of guardrails on it. The biggest one really being that we actually have a check back on it this coming January. So if we want the bill that we just passed to continue, we have to also pass these new governance maps. So the new districts are going to be implemented. And if the maps are not good and we reject these maps that are being worked on right now, then the bill that we just passed, in essence, just goes away. So there's a lot of fear mongering and a lot of people that don't have they'll read whatever the NEA or whatever they see on Vermont Digger, and then they get upset by it. And so I've spent the last 2 weeks and just answering emails and having to explain to people that no, your school is not closing this year. No, we're not going to close your AP classes or your special education classes. That's not what this bill does at all. But people think that that's what the bill does because that's what they've read.
Right.
Whether that's on Facebook or whether that's in Vermont Digger or in an email. And that's the problem with politics, is that there's always going to be um, groups or people that want to skew the public perception and the public discourse in a way that benefits them and what they're trying to do, and from their own interests.
When you were on the show last, a lot of what you were, was before you actually served. And so you were operating a lot on theory. And have you realized how, like, when I used to cover occasional legislative sessions with the Chronicle back in my Chronicle days, so I had the basic idea of how things worked. But when I actually served in legislature, I actually found out how much more goes on behind the scenes than I ever imagined. Are you surprised about all you're learning?
No, no, not at all. It's actually been a fairly short learning curve for me as a freshman legislator, and especially as a very young legislator. I've definitely learned things, but a lot less than I expected to, and a lot of the things that I've encountered and experienced have followed what I was expecting.
Right.
Um, it's it is a lot of those behind doors conversations and a lot of those off the record conversations that help bills make it through the process. Because sometimes, and I've had conversations about this with a number of people, is that the fact that everybody's on record and the fact that everybody's being recorded constantly is wonderful for the public to be able to see what we're doing. But at the same time, it makes legislators less willing to say things that might need to be said, because in the next election, some opponent is going to take it completely out of context and they're going to make them sound bad, um, and not only hurt them in the next election, but just hurt their reputation when that clip out of context was out of context and did
Right.
not mean what they meant, what they were saying on the
Right.
recording at all. So um, I've had a number of conversations about this with constituents, with other legislators, with other members of state government, and there is a general belief that the cameras and all the recordings has made the legislative process significantly worse, and less debate happens and less conversations happen, because when you're speaking extemporaneously, sometimes you say things you don't mean, or sometimes you don't say things in the right way. Sometimes you can't form the thoughts that you have in your head, and verbalizing them can be difficult. So you might say things again out of context that don't sound great at all. So there's just it. A lot of people think it stifles debate, and I agree with that entirely. And I think that the recordings a lot have been used more by the lobbyists and the special interest groups, and more than the general public. Most people are not tuning on to the live stream of the Health and Welfare Committee. You know,
Right.
that's just
Right.
not what happens. The majority of the people that are watching the recordings or getting onto the live streams are the lobbyists and the various different special interest groups, so that they can pay attention. And we've seen a marked decrease in the number of individuals that are there in person watching, because those organizations can just sit back and relax and watch a stream from a distance. So it's really more of a tool right now for them to stay apprised of what's happening rather than it is for the public to stay apprised of what's happening. Um, and I think it's also just a kind of a symptom of a general issue that we have with political discourse in this country, and that's we don't trust the people that we elect. We elect them, we like them during campaign season, and then they fall off the face of the earth, and then you don't trust them anymore. And when there's distrust, I don't think the system works. And I think that having the cameras is a symptom of the fact that we don't trust our legislators to go in there and legislate on our behalf. And I think that's really sad. And I think it's a symptom of where this.
So you're
this country's
talking
going.
about right in the committee rooms that you're talking about, because we didn't really have much in the way of videos in the committee rooms when I was there. We had them, of course. We had news organizations out on the House floor, and occasionally they would poke their noses into the committee rooms. So
we ever since COVID, now we have cameras on basically every surface.
Oh, that would be different. I'll tell you one thing, and I have spent one form or another in the media world most of my life. Small media, but I have no idea anymore how somebody is supposed to educate themselves. And this is my take on it: is we no longer have much in the way of news people. We now have, this is, as I said, not everybody will agree with me. We now have a lot of media organizations seem to be the PR wing of one party or the other. I will have to give a shout out to Mike Donahue. Mike Donahue has been a reporter longer than I've been alive, and he has not forgot the mission of being a newsman. And so I just, I don't know. I don't have any idea how people are supposed to form an opinion on what's really going on. No, I'm not talking about Vermont necessarily, but the nation and the world, because the news is little more than opinion now.
I mean, I completely agree. I see that in local news. I see that in state news. I see that in national news. And all over Facebook, people will share opinions or clips from newspaper articles and provide zero context. And then people get angry. I think social media and I think the internet as a whole has just become a place for fear mongering and propaganda, misinformation. And I don't think it's done public discourse any favors.
Yeah.
And I look at it from also as a mental health clinician. I look at it from a mental health perspective, and I see so many people just absolutely very upset over every time they go onto Facebook. And I don't understand. I don't go scrolling on Facebook anymore except for just trying to stay in touch with local constituents. Just because all I see is just people getting angry, so much negativity, and I don't understand why anybody would want that. And I think for a lot of people, it's addictive. Going in there and getting into fights and getting into arguments, I think it is addictive for some people, and very damaging for a lot of others. So I completely agree with you. I think a lot of news has definitely become more propagandized and more of opinion pieces than it is actual news. So.
Okay, we only have a couple more minutes left. How can somebody contact you? Or do they have, do you just want to hear from constituents or from anybody?
I mean, anybody can contact me. My email is publicly listed on the state website, sdouglas@ledge.vt, or sorry, shoot, I never really read it off to people. At ledge.state.vt.us. There we go. It's very long. And you can find that on the website. And anybody can email me. I prefer to get emails from constituents because those are the people that elect me, and those are the people that I definitely want to be talking to more. But I respond to the majority of the emails that I get from people outside the district too. So I'm happy to answer your questions if anybody has any. It's been a good session, kind of a slow session in a lot of places, but it's definitely opened my eyes to some things that I was not aware of, and also met my expectations in a lot of ways that I was aware of. as it is. I'm the youngest senator in state history, and it's been very interesting to serve with much older colleagues, especially in instances where we're talking about things like artificial intelligence
Oh, you
and
are? You're
and
the
Bitcoin.
youngest? You're the
I'm
youngest?
the youngest in state history. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, how old are you, since it's public record?
I was 25 when I was elected. I'm 26 now.
Oh, really? I did
And,
not.
yeah.
Has anybody ever talked about that? You being the
Nope.
youngest?
Nope.
Really? Really? Huh? That's
Yep.
interesting.
I've had people wonder why that there wasn't like a news story, but frankly, I don't really need a news story.
Right. Right.
But it's been interesting working with older colleagues, especially on things like like artificial intelligence and computers, information technology. But it's been a good session, and I'm excited for the next one. So
Okay. Well, we've got to wrap up, but maybe before the beginning of the session, we will have you back on.
I'd love to.
All right. Well, thank you, and thank you for all you're doing for the state of Vermont.
Thank you, Scott.
And thank you to the viewers for tuning in to another segment of the Northeast Kingdom Voice.